All right, Miles, let's head up to the Pacific Northwest, talk a little Seattle Seahawks. This is a football team obviously coming off a little bit of surprising year to the upside. They made the playoffs. A lot of people thought it'd be rebuilding year, and they're heading into the offseason with a lot of momentum. And right now, at this point in the offseason, with the free agent tag period ending, we're about to enter full-blooded true free agency. A lot of moves are going to happen. But I think right now, the way it's all shaking out, it looks like the Seattle Seahawks are doing everything right. And we've got some specifics going to how smart the Seahawks have been already this offseason.
Yeah, Nick, and we talk about doing everything right. Seattle's done a lot right in the past, and they've got a lot of really strong players throughout their history. So that's why we want to know in the comments below, who is your quintessential Seattle Seahawk? Who is the person that when you think of someone putting on a Seahawks jersey, what guy pops into your mind? Who do you see wearing that jersey? Who's your quintessential Seattle Seahawk? Let us know in the comments below. But Nick, you mentioned it. What is Seattle doing right?
Yeah, so one of the things right now is we're going through all the news that's happening in the NFL, and we're filming it today. It'll go out tomorrow. A big, massive news day specifically involving franchise tag and extending guys at the quarterback position, or sometimes not extending guys at the quarterback position. If you go up to the Big Apple, you go up to New York, right? A lot of conversation about Daniel Jones. The New York Giants decided to lock him up to a 4-year, $160 million deal. Confirmed by multiple sources. Obviously, a couple of days ago, the New Orleans Saints locked up free agent Derek Carr to a 4-year, $150 million deal. Kind of a mass move there, of course, by the Saints and the Giants. Very quietly under the radar, the Seahawks did a great job locking up Geno Smith to a 3-year, $105 million deal. I don't think all of the details have been completely finalized, but the overall structure has set in place. And there's two things I want to point out here, Mize, is that when you hear the Giants and the Saints deal, everything hearing from Giants fans or Saints fans at Giants media, Saints media, every single one of them is like, because people are like, oh, that's too much for Jones. It's too much for Derek Carr. And like, well, after a year or two, they got a lot of void years, a lot of guaranteed money on the front end. They can actually cut them and move on from a year from two if they don't like it. Is that really a good sign? Can you think of any relationship, personal or business wise, where you're like, well, in a year or two, we can always cut away and the losses will be minimal, right? That's not a good sign. You hear nothing of that with the Seattle Seahawks and Geno Smith. It was all quiet, well negotiated, under the table. Compare that with like the Lamar Jackson situation, right? No drama at all, figured out, resolved, no problem. And there's not a single peep of people like, well, how could they move out, after year one or year two, or how could they move on a different way? How could they extend them? How could they trade them or something like that? No conversation at all. That's how you know the Seahawks are doing things right. Because you look at the Saints, you look at the Giants, people are like, that may be a reach for Derek Carr. That may be a reach for Daniel Jones. Everyone looks at the Seahawks and they're like, great move, fantastic move. And it just makes sense. So if you look at a 3-year, $105 million deal, Miles, that's, roughly, I think it's exactly $35 million per year annualized. If you look at where that sits in the average cap hit in terms of quarterback, that's under Derek Carr. That's obviously under what Daniel Jones is going to be. That's under Dak Prescott, under Matt Stafford. It's under Kyler Murray, under Russell Wilson, under Aaron Rodgers, obviously under guys like Mahomes and Josh Allen, who are probably worth the money. It's right in line with like Kirk Cousins. I'd rather have Geno Smith than Kirk Cousins today. I think most people would agree with that. So it's just one of those things. When you're doing everything right as an organization like Seattle does, you almost don't get in the news very much because you're just executing at a very high level. I think if I'm a Seahawks fan right now, even though there's not a lot of drama, even though you're not dominating the headlines or the talk on ESPN or whatever right now, I think considering what everybody else is doing in the talk around the rest of the league, the Seahawks are completely crushing it so far this offseason.
Yeah, no, and I mean, you go through, and I like how you said Geno has the lowest hit of the three guys that were
By far. Yeah.
But you look at them. I'm gonna read you some numbers here, Nick. 66.6, 75.8, 79.3. Geno Smith by far also has the highest PFF grade from last season. He's been a guy. I'd say all of these guys. Derek Carr has been inconsistent with his ability to, lead the Raiders far in the playoffs. Daniel Jones, this was his best year by far. He was inconsistent at best up to this year. Obviously, that's why the Giants did not pick up his 5th-year option. That was kind of like a prove-it year. And then you look at Geno Smith. He's a guy. He had nothing to prove. He's been a strong backup in the past. People really liked him, and he came in. And when first given the opportunity, he came out and balled out in Seattle's system, and he looked really, really strong. But I want to go back to something you said because I really, really like what you said. You say the first things you hear, the gut reactions about Daniel Jones and Derek Carr are, well, in about a year or so, we can possibly move out from under this. Yeah. It's if you're a business, I want to say, if you're going to go sponsor somebody or do anything, like do a deal, the first thing that comes to your mind should not be, well, we could get away from this if we have to. It should more be, wow, this is really great. We're going to be in for a really
Yeah.
solid 3 years. Not in a year or two, we can get out of this if we need to. That does not instill hope into an organization.
No, not at all. It's like, think about a relationship. It's like immediate exit strategy. It's like, well, if this doesn't work out, I'll just dip out. It's one of those things. It's not a good sign that you've made a right decision when your first reaction, well, what's my exit strategy? Right. It's just an indicator, right? And it's one of those things that was very interesting because you heard it from Saints media, you heard it from Giants media, almost across the board. Nothing from Seahawks, nothing about Seattle. And again, it just goes to show how smart Seattle has done. Really, they've been that way over the past decade or so, but how smart they've done recently. And despite all of this, despite crushing the Geno Smith hiring and all the buzz around that, they still have 2 first-round draft picks. They got a top 10 draft pick. Right. They could still potentially get a quarterback to develop there. I think I actually like them getting a guy like Hendon Hooker later in the draft, potentially. The point is they crushed the Geno Smith hiring. It's a great deal for both sides, and they have an insane amount of draft capital and a lot of different directions to go in free agency as well. Right now, the Seahawks are quietly crushing it. I mean, outside the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC, this is probably the best run franchise in that conference. And I don't even think it's even that close.